Hi, everyone. Welcome to our next workshop session, Teaching for Students, Honoring BIPOC Voices in the Classroom and Beyond with Karina Guerrero. We encourage you to live chat along with our presenter today. If you're not seeing the chat right now, feel free to refresh your browser and you should see it below your screen. So the gathering today is an inclusive and affirming environment. We'll be actively moderating the chat, and you can help report any accounts to YouTube as needed. And your chats mean a lot to our presenters, so we encourage you to actively participate, respond, ask questions. Without further ado, we are so pleased to welcome Karina Guerrero.
Thank you. So everyone, welcome to today's workshop or conversation. Again, my name is Karina Guerrero. And so a little bit of a short description for this conversation. I invite everyone from different backgrounds, from different grade levels to explore how we can uplift and honor our BIPOC students, by affirming their identity, their center belonging, and disrupt deficit narratives. And I think throughout different, sessions, you've seen that. I'll be drawing from Tara Yoso's 2005 Community Cultural Wealth Framework. And we're going to examine some of these concepts applied in classroom spaces to celebrate students' culture, language, and lived experiences. Hopefully, by the end, you'll be able to leave with actionable ideas to reimagine what teaching looks like in your classroom spaces and what being an ally and an advocate for students, both inside and beyond the classroom, looks like. And I think that before I move on, I really want to go ahead and share that what Chris said earlier about who do we fight for? And so I just want you to ground yourself in that and think about why are we here in these spaces today? Because, we are giving up, our Saturday morning to extend some of those, professional learning experiences. So with that, our objectives for today would be to identify, how deficit narratives show up in classroom spaces and how they impact our BIPOC students. Explain, if you haven't heard who Terry Yoso is, what her framework encompasses and how that's relevant to our teaching practices. Thirdly, how do we apply culturally sustaining strategies to create student-centered learning environments that affirm identity and, center belonging in the classroom? And then hopefully by the end, again, reflect on our own teaching practices and then develop next steps. How do we reimagine classroom spaces and how are we advocates, especially in such a critical time and moment in our society when I think it's crucially needed. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a little bit of time. What are your learning intentions? And we all gave up, a little bit of our own personal time to be here. So why did you come here today? And what are you hoping to learn? If you want to, write that in your own writing space, or if you want to share that with others in the chat. And I'm going to go ahead and share with everyone. I'm a nerd at heart. I love going to PD and just, get things and, take them back to the classroom, share with my colleagues. That was really always my thing. Like, I want to go and learn from others, especially when, sometimes some of us may not always have the time to go back to school. So with that, I want to first share, who am I? So my positionality, and I'm, quoting from Kimberly Crenshaw, you can't, ignore what lens you bring into cultural spaces. I'm a high school teacher, Spanish teacher. I'm a current PhD student. This is my 17th year teaching. I served as a department chair, taught avid. I'm an used to be an ESL adult instructor. I've held various leadership roles. I'm a proud Latina, a mother, educator, now a newly scholar. I'm bilingual in Spanish and English. I identify as a heritage Spanish speaker. And so a lot of people think, why does she share this? Okay, these are all, how I look at life. These are my lenses. And so sometimes you need to remind ourselves, what do we bring into these spaces? Who are we? Because our lived experiences and who we are do impact who we are in the classroom. And additionally, my lived experiences, I'm a first gen. I've faced first language attrition. Faced, challenges being an English language learner. I lived as an undocumented student until the 10th grade. I encountered, racial ethnic microaggressions. I in both academic and professional spaces, and I continually work towards balancing motherhood and career in education. And I think that is the most challenging aspect, and I don't know how many moms we have here this morning, this afternoon. It's hard to be a teacher, an educator, a scholar, being a mom, okay? Because you have to balance so much. And oh gosh, I could have a whole PD on being a mom and being an educator. But moving on, okay, I grew up in Ontario, California, so I'm from the West Coast, in a traditional Mexican household. My journey started as an undocumented student. I assimilated to the American culture and I was embarrassed of my own culture. So my parents are both immigrants, brought me here when I was one, and just grew up in the US. And so, a lot of what I've lived through, a lot of the traumas, a lot of the aggressions, I've carried them with me. And these are things that I don't think that they can disappear. And part of it, I'm going back to school. I go to therapy. I have a therapist, and the achievement gap continues to be real. Like I know people say it's imposter syndrome, but sometimes it's like I have to work 10 times harder. And so showing up in these spaces, I also want to go ahead and share with you that how do we get our kids to be, successful? Even after they leave our classrooms, how can they be, you know, the best version of themselves? With that, yeah, I'm going to move on to Terry Yoso's Whose Culture Has Capital. And this term, if you don't know it, I actually did not know this. In my own journey through my schooling, I did not hear about critical race theory. And in conversations with one of my colleagues, he tells me, "Well, what type of university were you going to?" And the reality is, some of our universities may be more conservative, and some of these concepts, some of these frameworks, some of these theories might be left out. And so this critical race theory examines, racism and how it intersects. And so the response to the classroom, how do we respond to systemic inequities in the classroom? And one of the things that CRT challenged was the idea that classrooms are not neutral spaces. As much as some of us want to think, let's keep the politics out of education, we can't keep them out. And so these spaces continue to reveal how inequities disadvantage communities of color. And as a response, Terry Yoso developed, you know, community cultural wealth frameworks to reframe the conversations. And I think most of us, okay, including myself, have sometimes, leaned on, well, the parents don't care, the kids don't care. They're not here because, education isn't important. And so instead of viewing, this, okay, having these ideas and this perspective, I want to challenge us to shift our perspective. How do our BIPOC students come into our classrooms? Using Yoso's six K community and oh my gosh, I can't capital, six capitals, cultural, six forms of cultural capital: aspirational, linguistic, familial, social, navigational, and resistant. What do they bring with them, these students? How do we recognize their value and build upon these strengths to create more equitable and affirming classrooms? And that's really what I want us to think about today. And so I can share this article with everyone, but I want to go ahead and have us think about how do we think about the students in our classrooms? Do we know anything about their backgrounds? Do we know what they like, what they enjoy? And oftentimes it takes a while. And I'm not gonna lie to you, it's work. Because we can talk about food, we can talk about music, but really getting to know our students, it's hard work. And so I think a lot of the underlying issues is that sometimes, these perceptions, these views, these thoughts, the importance of who they are, I think sometimes we and I'm talking about myself, it's overlooked. And Terry also does challenge us to think, how do we go beyond just saying, we're gonna do, a Cinco de Mayo coloring assignment, or we're gonna go and watch a YouTube video on why do we celebrate Black History Month. It goes beyond that. And so the danger here lies that sometimes we're like, well, we are being inclusive, we are including culture. And then oftentimes, okay, it's, the same repetitive, over the surface things happened. We're not really doing more than surface level, okay, practices. And so these 6 forms, aspiration, I want you to think about maintaining hope and dreams despite barriers. Linguistic, seeing the kids for having multilingual skills, being able to come into the classroom, storytelling, being able to storytell, having different modes of communication. And I am currently taking a class with one of my professors who's amazing about social justice and linguistics. And we're currently focusing on Black language. And again, these are things that we otherwise wouldn't learn in credential programs. And it makes me so upset because we shouldn't have to wait until we decide if we want to do a PhD to learn about these issues. These should be embedded in our credentialing programs, okay, or in our school in our districts as professional development, familial capital. It's being able to have cultural memory, kinship, extended networks. And oftentimes, sometimes we say, well, we can't talk about family. So we might have foster care students or students who might not have families, um, or might not have, what we consider to be gender normative family. And so, how do we extend those networks to encompass that family isn't just what we think a family looks like? It can be someone that they chose to have. When it comes to social capital, it's community networks and peer support. Having our students understand that they already come in with social capital. They have friends, they have networks, they have peer support, navigational skills, maneuver institutions not designed for them, and resistance, knowledge and skills to challenge inequality. So in reflecting, and I know I went through it really fast, it takes a long time, and I'm still learning how to really reflect and how to really deeply think about the 6 forms of social capital. It's what capitals do you see most alive in the classroom, and which one is overlooked in your school? So I want to go back because I think that oftentimes when I think about resistance, there's students who resist. There's students who are getting in trouble. There's students who are talking back. There's students who are saying, I don't like to be treated this way. And when we don't look at it from an asset-based framework, we're saying you're being disruptive, you're being defiant. And so what Yoso tells us is, how do we change that deficit mindset to think about our students being more capable of engaging with capital, with having an idea that they come in with so much knowledge, maybe not book knowledge, maybe they're struggling and they're not there yet. But despite not being there yet, they're coming in with, having hope that they're going to be able to obtain a high school diploma, having linguistic abilities because they communicate, whether we think it's the proper form of English, they come in with having extended networks. They come in with having friends, having social connections, having something. And so what we want to do is see what is most alive in the classroom and what do we overlook. And I can tell you, I've overlooked so many things. As a Spanish teacher, initially when I started my career, I would always correct my kids and say, "You're not saying it correctly. This is not the proper way of saying it." And, I had to reflect on my own practices and say, I'm not, who am I to say what proper Spanish is? Who am I to say that their family's heritage language is wrong? And so I really think that reflecting on those concepts, thinking about what do my students bring in, okay, the knowledge that I can go ahead and hold space for and ground here in my classroom. So, some of the strategies I want to share with you this morning: aspirational capital. Since we're talking about hopes and dreams, despite having barriers, some of the strategies that we can incorporate in our classroom would be creating vision boards or dream walls where students display future goals. And oftentimes, you know, I don't know that we make the time for students to really talk about what they want. Goal settings, highlighting successes, or success stories of people from similar backgrounds. And I think I really want to stop here and say, how often do we ask kids to think about their goals? We ask them when they grow up, and I have little ones, and it's always that question: what do you want to be when you grow up? And as a high school teacher, and I don't know how many high school teachers we have here today, how many of us forget to ask them, what do you want to be when you leave high school, when you grow up? What's has it changed? And I think that the scary part is that because they haven't been asked. Um, some of our kids don't know what to say. And I don't know how many of you feel that. Like, I feel the heaviness of even saying it. They're saying, I don't know, I don't have plans. And that to me is the saddest part. Like, we want to go ahead and encourage them. What are those plans? Um, oh, so with my next one, oh shoot, sorry, linguistic capital. Our students come in with so much um, capital when it comes to language. And maybe it's not the standard mainstream English language, but they're coming in being multilingual language learners. And so looking at this, it's, the traditions, allowing students to write or present in multiple languages. And I know celebrating code switching, and there's a push about saying, well, what if I don't have to code switch anymore? What if I can use translanguaging and to talk about, a story using the languages that I know, and that not being seen as a deficit. And again, we will get pushback saying, well, they need to know how to speak English. And so we're not going to debate, but just an idea. And then using oral histories or storytelling circles as linguistic capital. And this can be done at all grade levels, K through 12. Familial capital, inviting family community members as guest speakers. I think, again, okay, I have elementary school, a student, a kid in elementary school. And, we have classroom parents. I wish we had some in high school. And I don't think high school kids would want their parents to be classroom parents, but inviting members, having them be like, hey, invite your parents. They have good things to say. Encourage them, use projects that ask students to interview family members, create class culture walls with photos, recipes, traditions, bring in what they know. And the more that you do this, kids are going to be seen. And if a kid is seen and heard, they're going to feel, okay, encouraged to actually thrive in your classroom spaces. Social capital, networks, and mentorship. I don't know how many of us have peer mentoring groups, programs in our schools, but connecting students with clubs, organizations, and role models will really help students, continue to thrive. And I think oftentimes students may feel, well, I don't have anyone here. Why do I even show up to high school? And encouraging those students who are feeling like they're being pushed out of high school to have friends, to have some way to get hooked back into school. The next one, navigational capital. Teach students how to read, transcripts apply to scholarships, walk through school systems, how to talk to counselors, find resources. And when we talk about navigational capital, how do we move through institutions? Oftentimes, our kids lack understanding of how do I just ask for help? I don't even know who my counselor is. Okay, how do I even approach my counselor? And so it's really intentionally having those conversations with students, and it might have to be, a 5-minute conversation. I'm not asking or saying, let's take our entire curriculum time to do this. But, having our students be self advocates, practicing how do we continue to navigate spaces where oftentimes I feel like I don't belong or I feel like I'm not seen. Social capital. Wait, no, we already did this. Sorry. Resistant capital, which is the last one I want to go ahead and end with, would be asking our kids to be critical thinkers. And I think with what we're experiencing as a society, as a country, this is a time where we should encourage our kids to really go beyond analyzing what's being published outside of our classrooms. And I know we cannot say, we can't bring politics into the classroom and their neutral spaces, but the fact is that some of our students' communities are being impacted by this. And it's unfair to say that we're not going to talk about this when, their experiences say otherwise. And one of the things that I want to share with everyone in California, where we've had a lot of ICE raids and kidnappings, students, often teachers, we don't want to have those conversations with students because it's scary. And like as an educator, what are my rights? Can I have these conversations? Can I share with students what, just resources out there? And we actually had one of our families be impacted by this in the summer during summer school. And it was scary because even as an educator, as an adult who's here legally, I had to go ask my principal, what are we going to do? If school starts and this happens, what are we going to do? And I was told it's not going to happen here, but we cannot guarantee that it's not going to happen. And so resistant capital is having those skills to challenge these inequities because they exist. Whether we want to acknowledge them or not, they're there. And so classroom discussions on current events and social justice issues, I think, are important, especially for students who sometimes don't know how to navigate these spaces. And supporting student-led initiatives, clubs, or advocacy projects. So I know it's a lot. Okay, and like I said, I'm learning, and it's my first presentation, and hopefully I did good. I did well. But I want us to think about the following: whose voices are missing? So reflecting on your own curriculum and classroom conversations, thinking about the space, your classroom space, which voices, stories, or perspectives are not present, and how might you intentionally bring them in? So for me, I went back to teaching Spanish learners. In the past, I was teaching primarily Spanish heritage speakers, which most of them are Hispanic Latino. And one of the things that I've noticed, and being more intentional, more critical of my own practices, is that oftentimes I'm not including everyone. And so one of the things that I'm trying to do is incorporate who's a Spanish speaker, because we have so many immigrants that move to Spanish speaking countries. And so whose stories can I bring into the classroom space where I can honor them? And I don't know how many of you are also being able to reflect on those um, spaces. Like even if it's one student, how do we intentionally, have that student feel welcome? The second one is, how could we reimagine classrooms looking like? If there were no barriers, what would a truly student-centered, identity-affirming space look like, sound, feel like for your students? And I think it would look so different in so many different spaces depending on your, district, depending on your department, depending on the curriculum you teach, depending if you're in elementary, depending if you're in middle school, high school. I think your classroom reimagination would be different in any of these spaces. And also depending on your demographics. Okay, you need to know your area. You need to know who your community is, what it looks like, what it sounds like, and what it feels like. Are you able to have these conversations? If you're not able to have these conversations, how do you navigate these spaces where there's already that, okay, impact where people's certain voices aren't being heard? Sorry, and let me go back. So, everyone, thank you for being here today. Okay, I know that this is just a little bit a snippet, okay, but it's really hoping that you took something out of this, okay, short conversation. Okay, again, my name is Karina Guerrero. I am a Spanish teacher, okay, former adult ESL instructor, 16 years of experience in the world language classroom, starting my 17th. And here's my info if you want to directly email me at karinag1101@gmail.com or follow me on Instagram. And then lastly, I just want to end with remember our students bring wealth with them, and it's our job to see it, nurture it, and center it. Okay, and that goes for all students.
Wow, Karina, thank you so much for that important message and reminder for all of us watching, being inspired by these reminders to bring in the assets that our students and their families have for us. Such a powerful reminder for all of us. Just as a reminder, as we close our time for today, our gathering has always been free to attend, and if you felt inspired as I did by this session, we ask that you visit our charity page and pay the joy forward. Coming up next, we have our closing, town hall closing with our founding director, Christopher Lehman. You can watch here on YouTube if you've registered for the Zoom gathering to view it in the town hall. We invite you to jump over there. You can find access to the closing at gathering.theedcolab.com. Thank you again for joining us today. Goodbye.